Miranda Jenkins clutched the worn portfolio case against her chest as she hurried through the gleaming lobby of Meridian Enterprises. The marble floors reflected the morning sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, nearly blinding her as she fumbled with her visitor's badge. At 28, with dark circles under her eyes and a second-hand blazer that had seen better days, she felt painfully out of place among the polished executives gliding through the space with confidence she could only dream of possessing. "Floor 52, please," she murmured to the elevator attendant, who barely acknowledged her with a curt nod. Miranda checked her watch. 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes early for her interview, just as she had planned. The cleaning job wasn't glamorous, but Meridian offered health benefits that would cover Jamie's medical treatments, and the night shift would allow her to keep her daytime position at the diner. 2 jobs and single motherhood wasn't ideal, but for her 6-year-old son, she would move mountains. The elevator ascended smoothly, carrying Miranda toward what she hoped would be a turning point. As other passengers entered and exited at various floors, she rehearsed her answers in her head, gripping her portfolio tighter. Inside were her resume, references, and tucked between the pages, a colorful crayon drawing Jamie had made that morning. "This is for luck, Mommy," he had said, pushing the paper into her hands before she left their tiny apartment. "I drew you cleaning the biggest building in the world." The memory of his gap-toothed smile steadied her nerves as the elevator climbed higher. When the doors finally opened on the 52nd floor, Miranda stepped into a hushed reception area where a sleek-looking woman with impeccable makeup sat behind a curved desk. "I'm here for the maintenance staff interview," Miranda said, trying to keep her voice from trembling. The receptionist, Diane according to her nameplate, looked up with an expression that seemed to assess and dismiss Miranda in the same moment. "Take a seat. Mr. Reynolds will be with you shortly." Miranda perched on the edge of an uncomfortable modernist chair, arranging her portfolio on her lap. She carefully extracted her resume, but as she did, Jamie's drawing slipped out, floating to the floor like an autumn leaf. She lunged to catch it, but her fingers only grazed the edge before it landed face up on the polished floor. Just as she bent to retrieve it, the elevator doors opened again, and a tall man in an immaculate charcoal suit stepped out. His presence immediately filled the space, commanding attention without effort. Miranda froze, instantly recognizing the face she'd seen in countless business magazines and news segments. Jackson Harrington, CEO of Meridian Enterprises, the man who was supposedly worth billions, walked with purpose, his attention focused on the smartphone in his hand until he nearly stepped on Jamie's drawing. He paused, looking down at the colorful paper beneath his Italian leather shoes. Miranda scrambled to her feet. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said, bending to snatch the drawing. But Jackson Harrington was already crouching down, picking up the paper with surprising gentleness. His eyes scanned the childish scrawl, a stick figure with a mop standing beside a rectangular shape that vaguely resembled a building with "Mommy" written above it in crooked letters. In the corner, Jamie had carefully printed his full name, Jamie Harrington, in large, uneven capital letters. The CEO's face transformed instantly. The composed, almost stern expression melted away, replaced by something Miranda couldn't quite define. Shock, disbelief, perhaps even pain. The color drained from his face as he stared at the name. "Where did you get this?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but the intensity behind it made Miranda step back. It's my son's drawing," she stammered. "He made it this morning for good luck." Jackson Harrington looked up at her, his piercing blue eyes searching her face with such intensity that Miranda felt as if he were trying to memorize every feature. "Your son's name is Jamie Harrington?" he asked, his voice controlled but tight. Miranda nodded, confusion washing over her. "Yes, James, actually. James Harrington Jenkins." Something flickered in the CEO's eyes. "How old is he?" 6, Miranda replied, increasingly uncomfortable with the personal questions from a man she'd never met. "I'm sorry, but why are you asking about my son?" Jackson Harrington straightened to his full height, still holding the drawing with unexpected care. "Ms. Jenkins, Miranda Jenkins. Ms. Jenkins." He seemed to test the name on his tongue. "I believe we need to talk, privately." The receptionist, who had been watching the exchange with barely concealed curiosity, quickly averted her eyes when Jackson glanced in her direction. "Diane, cancel my 9 o'clock, and please inform Mr. Reynolds that Ms. Jenkins will be interviewing with me instead." Miranda's heart hammered against her ribs. Interview with the CEO for a maintenance position? None of this made sense. "Sir, I'm just here for the night cleaning staff position," she explained, wondering if he had somehow confused her with another applicant. "I'm aware," he said simply, gesturing toward a set of double doors. "Please, this way." Miranda followed him through the doors into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. Jackson Harrington placed Jamie's drawing carefully on his immaculate desk before sitting down in a leather chair. He motioned for her to take the seat across from him. "Ms. Jenkins, forgive my directness, but I need to ask you about Jamie's father." The question hit Miranda like a physical blow. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed her portfolio on her lap. "That's quite personal, Mr. Harrington. I don't see how it's relevant to a cleaning position." "It may be more relevant than you realize," he said quietly. "Please." Something in his tone, an unexpected vulnerability, made Miranda hesitate. She rarely spoke about Jamie's father, a chapter of her life she'd tried to close years ago. "His father's name was Robert Harrington," she finally said. "We met at a charity event where I was working as a server. It was a brief relationship. He was only in town for business. When I discovered I was pregnant, he had already returned to Europe. I tried to contact him, but..." She swallowed hard. "The number he gave me was disconnected. I later learned he'd died in a car accident in Switzerland." Jackson Harrington's fingers tightened on the armrests of his chair. "Robert Harrington," he repeated, his voice hollow. "My younger brother." The words hung in the air between them, impossible, and yet somehow making perfect sense. Miranda stared at him, pieces falling into place. The shared surname she'd assumed was coincidental, the intense reaction to Jamie's drawing, the piercing blue eyes that now reminded her so much of her son's. "Your brother," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. Jackson nodded slowly. "Robert died 6 years ago. I never knew he had a child." He looked directly at her, his gaze unwavering. "I never knew I had a nephew." Miranda felt the room tilt slightly. The man sitting across from her, one of the most powerful executives in the country, was claiming to be Jamie's uncle. Her son, who had grown up without extended family, who had asked countless times about relatives during holidays when other children visited grandparents and cousins, suddenly had an uncle. An uncle who commanded a business empire. "I need proof, of course," Jackson continued, his business instincts apparently returning. "But if what you're saying is true, I have his birth certificate," Miranda interrupted, pulling it from her portfolio with shaking hands, "and photos. Robert is listed as the father. I never changed Jamie's surname because I wanted him to have that connection, even if his father wasn't in his life." Jackson took the document, studying it intently. His composed expression faltered again as he traced a finger over his brother's name. "He has Robert's eyes," Jackson said quietly. "I noticed it immediately." The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Outside the windows, the city continued its morning rush, unaware of the life-altering conversation taking place 52 stories above the street. "Ms. Jenkins," Jackson finally said, looking up from the birth certificate, "I believe we have much more to discuss than a maintenance position." Miranda sat frozen in her chair, watching as Jackson Harrington studied her son's birth certificate, with the intensity of a man trying to decipher ancient hieroglyphics. The office around them was silent, except for the faint hum of the building's ventilation system and the occasional distant ring of a telephone. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, clouds drifted past, making the room feel even more detached from reality, a floating island where the impossible was unfolding. "I'd like to see him," Jackson said finally, looking up at her with eyes that reminded her painfully of Jamie's when he was being serious. "If what you're saying is true, and I have no reason to doubt it given the documentation and timing, then Jamie is my only living blood relative." Miranda's protective instincts flared immediately. "Mr. Harrington, with all due respect, this is a lot to process. An hour ago I was here for a job interview. Now you're telling me you're my son's uncle and want to meet him." She took a deep breath. "Jamie doesn't know anything about his father's family. He's a sensitive child who's already dealing with health issues. I can't just introduce you into his life without careful consideration." Jackson leaned back in his chair, assessing her. For the first time, a hint of respect flickered across his features. "His health issues. What exactly is he dealing with?" His tone had softened, genuine concern replacing the earlier businesslike demeanor. Miranda hesitated, uncomfortable sharing such personal information with a stranger, even one who claimed to be family. But something in Jackson's expression, perhaps the same vulnerability she'd glimpsed earlier, convinced her to answer. Jamie has a congenital heart condition. It's not immediately life-threatening, but he needs regular monitoring and eventually surgery. She twisted her fingers in her lap. That's partly why I'm here. The medical benefits that come with this position would help cover treatments that our current insurance won't. Jackson's expression darkened. And you've been managing this alone, all these years? I've managed, Miranda said firmly, lifting her chin. We've managed. Jamie is a happy, creative child. He doesn't let his condition define him. Just like Robert, Jackson murmured almost to himself. At Miranda's questioning look, he explained, My brother had the same condition. It's genetic. He had corrective surgery when he was 12. This new revelation stunned Miranda. In their brief relationship, Robert had never mentioned any health issues. I didn't know, she said quietly. He never told me. Robert never liked appearing vulnerable, Jackson replied, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. Our father considered any weakness unacceptable. By the time Robert was an adult, he'd learned to hide anything that might be perceived as a flaw. Miranda recognized the subtle shift in the conversation. Jackson was sharing something personal, building a bridge between them. She found herself studying his face more carefully, noting the faint lines around his eyes that spoke of stress rather than age, the rigid posture that seemed more habitual than natural. What was he like? As a brother, I mean. The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Jackson's expression softened momentarily. Brilliant, restless, always chasing the next adventure. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Robert lived like he was trying to fit 100 years of experiences into however much time he had. Our parents died when he was in college, plane crash, and something in him changed after that. He couldn't stay in one place, couldn't commit to anything, or anyone for long. The description matched the Robert that Miranda had known. Charming, intense, here one moment and gone the next. She had never expected commitment from him. Their relationship had been brief but honest in its temporary nature. What she hadn't expected was the pregnancy, discovered weeks after he'd left for Europe. I tried to find him, she admitted. When I learned I was pregnant, the number he gave me was disconnected, and I had no other way to reach him. 6 months later, I saw a small news article about his accident. Jackson nodded grimly. He was driving too fast on a mountain road in Switzerland. The investigation suggested he was distracted, possibly on his phone. He reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a silver-framed photograph, turning it to face Miranda. This was taken a month before he died. The photo showed 2 men on what appeared to be a yacht, Jackson looking slightly younger and more relaxed, and beside him, a man with the same piercing blue eyes but with lighter hair and a carefree smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Robert. Miranda felt a pang of recognition. Jamie had that same smile. He looks happy, she said softly. He always did, Jackson replied. Even when he wasn't. He replaced the photo in the drawer. Ms. Jenkins, Miranda, I need to be completely honest with you. Finding out about Jamie has shaken me more than I can express. For 6 years I've believed I was alone, the last of the Harringtons. Now I discover my brother has a son, a nephew I never knew existed. Miranda understood the emotion behind his words. Family had always been a complicated concept in her life too. Raised by a single mother who had passed away during Miranda's first year of college, she had created her own definition of family with Jamie. The idea that her son might have a connection to someone else, someone who could offer him insights into the father he'd never known, both frightened and intrigued her. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Harrington? She asked cautiously. Jackson, please, he corrected automatically, and I'm not proposing anything yet. I'm asking for a chance to know my nephew, to be part of his life in whatever capacity you're comfortable with. He hesitated, then added, and to help with his medical expenses, of course. Miranda stiffened. We don't need charity. It's not charity, Jackson countered, a flash of irritation crossing his face. It's family responsibility. If Robert were here, he would have financial obligations to his son. In his absence, and as Jamie's closest relative, those obligations fall to me. I didn't come here looking for money, Miranda said firmly. I came looking for a job. Which you clearly don't need anymore, Jackson pointed out. Unless cleaning office buildings at night while raising a child with health issues is your passion? His condescending tone sparked Miranda's temper. What I need, Mr. Harrington, is stability for my son, not a wealthy uncle who might lose interest once the novelty wears off. The words struck a nerve. Jackson's expression hardened. You don't know me, Ms. Jenkins, and you didn't know my brother as well as you think either. The Harringtons don't abandon family. Robert abandoned us before he even knew we existed, Miranda countered, immediately regretting the harshness of her words. I'm sorry. That was unfair. He didn't know about Jamie. An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Outside, the clouds had darkened, promising rain. Miranda glanced at her watch, nearly 9:30. Her interview should have been over by now. Instead, her entire world had been upended. Jackson broke the silence first. I have a proposal, he said, his tone carefully neutral. A compromise. I'd like to meet Jamie in a setting of your choosing, where he feels comfortable. Just a casual introduction, no mention of our relationship unless you decide it's appropriate. In return, he paused, seeming to weigh his words. In return, I'll create a position for you here at Meridian that aligns with your actual qualifications, not as a cleaner. Miranda blinked in surprise. My qualifications? Your resume is still on my desk, Jackson said with a slight smile. Bachelor's degree in business administration, 3 years as an administrative assistant at Thompson Legal before they downsized. You're grossly overqualified for a maintenance position. Miranda flushed. The economic downturn had hit her hard, and with Jamie's medical needs she had applied for anything and everything. I need flexible hours, she said. Jamie's appointments can be accommodated, Jackson finished for her. Meridian has comprehensive benefits and flexible scheduling for employees with family responsibilities. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. This isn't charity either, Miranda. It's a practical solution. You need appropriate employment. Meridian needs qualified staff, and His voice softened almost imperceptibly. I'd like the chance to know my brother's son. Miranda studied him, trying to see beyond the powerful executive to the man beneath. A man who had just discovered a connection to the brother he'd lost. Despite her reservations, she could understand his desire to know Jamie. Hadn't she often wished her son could have family beyond just her? I need time to think, she said finally, and to figure out how to explain this to Jamie. He's asked about his father's family before, but this is, she gestured vaguely, complicated. Jackson nodded, reaching for a business card and writing something on the back. My personal number, he said, sliding it across the desk to her. Take whatever time you need. The job offer stands regardless of your decision about Jamie. Miranda accepted the card, noticing the weight of the paper, the embossed lettering. Everything about Jackson Harrington spoke of a world so different from her own that it was difficult to imagine any point of intersection, except for the 6-year-old boy with Robert's blue eyes and smile. Thank you, she said, rising from her chair and gathering her portfolio. I'll be in touch once I've had time to process everything. Jackson stood as well, extending his hand. I look forward to hearing from you, Miranda. As their hands met in a brief handshake, Miranda couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this chance encounter because of a child's drawing, had irrevocably altered the course of her and Jamie's lives. For better or worse remained to be seen. 3 days after her encounter with Jackson Harrington, Miranda sat on a bench in Westside Park, watching Jamie feed ducks by the small pond. The autumn sunlight filtered through red and gold leaves, casting dappled shadows across her son's excited face as he tossed breadcrumbs to the eager birds. His blue jacket, a size too large to accommodate growth spurts, made him look smaller than his 6 years, but his laughter carried across the water with surprising strength. Miranda checked her watch again. Jackson had agreed to meet them at the park at 2 o'clock, a neutral location where Jamie would be comfortable. She had ultimately decided to introduce them simply as Mr. Harrington, a friend who knew your daddy, without immediately revealing their family connection. Jamie knew so little about his father that any information would be precious to him. Mommy, look, that one took it right from my hand, Jamie called out, his gap-toothed smile beaming with delight. Be careful not to get too close to the edge, sweetheart, she reminded him, scanning the park entrance for any sign of Jackson. At precisely 2 o'clock, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Miranda's stomach tightened with anxiety as Jackson emerged, looking oddly out of place in the casual setting despite his attempt at informal attire. Dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He spotted them immediately and approached with measured steps, his expression a careful mask of neutrality. "Miranda," he greeted her with a nod before his eyes shifted to Jamie, who was now watching the stranger with curious interest. Something flickered across Jackson's face. Recognition, perhaps, or emotion quickly suppressed. "Jamie, come here, honey," Miranda called. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." Jamie approached cautiously, breadcrumbs still clutched in one small hand. Up close, the resemblance between nephew and uncle was even more striking. The same intense blue eyes, the same slight tilt of the head when assessing something new. "Jamie, this is Mr. Harrington. He knew your daddy a long time ago." Jamie's eyes widened. "You knew my dad?" he asked, his voice suddenly shy but eager. Jackson crouched down to Jamie's level, a gesture that surprised Miranda. "I did," he confirmed with a gentle smile that transformed his usually stern face. "We were very close." "Did he like ducks too?" Jamie asked, offering his remaining breadcrumbs as if sharing something precious. Jackson's laugh seemed startled out of him, genuine and warm. "He loved all animals," he said, accepting a few crumbs. "When he was about your age, he once tried to bring home a frog he found in a pond much like this one." Jamie giggled. "Did he keep it?" "Our mother made him return it to the pond," Jackson replied, his eyes distant with memory. "She said the frog would miss its family." "I don't have a frog, but I have a drawing of one," Jamie announced. "I could show you. I draw lots of things." "I'd like that very much," Jackson said, glancing at Miranda with a silent question. She nodded slightly. "Maybe Mr. Harrington could join us for ice cream after the park, and you could show him some of your drawings?" Jamie agreed enthusiastically, and the next hour passed with surprising ease. Jackson proved adept at connecting with Jamie, listening intently to the boy's stories and answering his endless questions about Robert with patient detail. Miranda observed their interaction with mixed emotions, joy at seeing Jamie so animated, unease at how quickly Jackson had slipped into their lives, and an unexpected pang of something like loss, as if she were witnessing the start of a relationship that might someday exclude her. At the ice cream parlor, while Jamie was distracted by the colorful display of flavors, Jackson leaned closer to Miranda. "He's extraordinary," he said quietly. "So much like Robert, but also entirely himself." Miranda nodded, watching her son point excitedly at the cookie dough flavor. "He's the best thing in my life. Thank you for this," Jackson added, his usual confidence giving way to genuine gratitude, "for allowing me to meet him." Before she could respond, Jamie returned to their table with a towering cone of chocolate and cookie dough ice cream already dripping onto his fingers. The moment of connection between the adults passed as they focused on preventing an ice cream disaster. Later, after Jamie had shown Jackson his collection of drawings and fallen asleep on the couch of their modest apartment, Miranda finally broached the subject they'd been avoiding. "What happens now?" she asked, keeping her voice low to avoid waking Jamie. Jackson stood by the window looking out at the city lights with an expression she couldn't read. "That depends on what you're comfortable with," he said. "I'd like to be part of his life to get to know him better. And I meant what I said about the job at Meridian. My assistant has already prepared the paperwork." Miranda sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It all seems so fast. A week ago you didn't know Jamie existed, and now you're ready to rearrange both our lives. When you've lost as much as I have, you learn not to waste time," Jackson replied, turning to face her. "I've spent 6 years mourning my brother and believing I was the last Harrington. Finding Jamie, finding family I didn't know I had, it's like getting a piece of Robert back." His honesty disarmed her. For a moment she could see past the powerful CEO to the man who had lost his entire family, one by one. "All right," she said finally, "we can try this, gradually. Weekend visits, maybe. And I'll consider the job offer, but I need to see the details first. What position did you have in mind?" "Executive assistant to the VP of Community Relations," Jackson said promptly. "Alice Chang has been looking for someone with both administrative experience and personal insight into community needs." "Your background makes you an excellent candidate." Miranda raised an eyebrow. "And the fact that I'm your newly discovered nephew's mother has nothing to do with it?" Jackson had the grace to look slightly abashed. It expedited the process, perhaps, but the position is legitimate and you're qualified. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Miranda frowned, checking the time. Nearly 9 in the evening, too late for casual visitors. She moved to the door and peered through the peephole, surprised to see a woman in her early 30s with auburn hair, pulled back in a severe bun. "Who is it?" Jackson asked, noticing her confusion. "I don't know," Miranda admitted, opening the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" The woman's gaze moved past Miranda to Jackson, her expression hardening. "I thought I might find you here," she said coldly. "When you missed our dinner meeting and your assistant claimed not to know where you were, I got curious. Your driver was more forthcoming." Jackson's posture stiffened. "Veronica, this isn't the time or place for whatever this is." The woman, Veronica, stepped into the apartment without waiting for an invitation, her expensive perfume filling the small space. "Oh, I think it's exactly the time," she countered. "Especially when my fiancé is spending evenings in a strange woman's apartment instead of discussing our wedding plans." Miranda's eyes widened as she looked between them. "Fiancé?" she repeated, feeling as if the floor had suddenly tilted beneath her. Jackson's expression was unreadable. "Miranda, this is Veronica Ashford. Veronica, this is Miranda Jenkins, a new employee at Meridian. A very special employee, apparently," Veronica observed with cutting precision. Her gaze swept the modest apartment before landing on the sleeping form of Jamie on the couch. "And who is this?" Before Jackson could answer, Jamie stirred, awakened by the unfamiliar voices. He sat up, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "Mommy?" Miranda moved quickly to his side. "It's okay, sweetie. These are just some friends of Mommy's who stopped by." Jamie blinked at the strangers, his gaze fixing on Veronica with childlike directness. "Your necklace is pretty," he said, pointing to the diamond pendant at her throat. Something in Veronica's expression shifted at the compliment. "Thank you," she said, her tone softening slightly. "What's your name?" "Jamie," he answered, looking to his mother for reassurance. "Jamie Harrington Jenkins." The effect of the name on Veronica was immediate and dramatic. Her head snapped toward Jackson, her face paling beneath her perfect makeup. "Harrington," she repeated. "What exactly is going on here, Jackson?" The tension in the room thickened as understanding dawned in Veronica's eyes. She looked from Jamie to Jackson and back again, making connections with frightening speed. "He has your eyes," she said quietly. "Exactly your eyes." "He's my nephew," Jackson stated firmly. "Robert's son." Veronica's laugh was brittle. "Robert's son. Your brother who died 6 years ago suddenly has a 6-year-old son you never mentioned." She turned to Miranda. "How convenient for you to appear just as the Harrington estate is finally settled. Did you know that Jackson officially inherited everything last month when the 7-year waiting period concluded?" Miranda felt her cheeks burn with indignation. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I came to Meridian looking for a job, not an inheritance." "A job?" Veronica repeated skeptically. "As what, exactly?" "That's enough, Veronica," Jackson cut in, his voice sharp. "How you're making accusations without any understanding of the situation." "Then enlighten me," she challenged. "Explain why you've been unreachable all evening, why your car is parked outside an apartment building in a neighborhood you'd never normally visit, and why there's a child calling himself Harrington, when just last week you told me you were the last of your line." Miranda looked to Jackson, suddenly aware of how this must appear from an outsider's perspective. The timing was indeed suspiciously convenient. Jackson had only discovered Jamie's existence after Robert's estate was fully settled. Something cold settled in her stomach as doubt crept in. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation another time," she suggested, wanting to protect Jamie from the growing tension. "It's getting late and Jamie needs his sleep." Veronica ignored her, focusing entirely on Jackson. "Is this why you've been stalling on setting a wedding date? Because you've been hiding a secret family?" "He's not hiding anything," Miranda interjected, her patience wearing thin. "He literally just found out about Jamie 3 days ago when I interviewed at Meridian." 3 days, Veronica repeated, turning her attention back to Miranda. "And already he's visiting your home in the evening? That seems rather intimate for a professional relationship." The implication hung in the air, ugly and insinuating. Miranda felt her temper flare. Mr. Harrington is here because he wanted to meet his nephew. There's nothing inappropriate happening. Not yet, perhaps, Veronica said coldly. But I've seen this pattern before. A convenient child appears, claiming Harrington blood, and suddenly there's a new woman in Jackson's life with access to the family fortune. She turned to Jackson. Did you even verify her story? Or were you so desperate for family that you accepted everything at face value? Jackson's expression darkened. I've seen the birth certificate. Jamie is Robert's son. Birth certificates can be altered, Veronica countered. DNA tests can't. The word struck Miranda like a physical blow. You think I'm lying? That I fabricated my son's paternity for money? I think, Veronica said carefully, that the timing is remarkably convenient, and I think Jackson's judgment is compromised by grief and loneliness. Jamie, sensing the tension, pressed closer to Miranda. Mommy, why is everyone mad? Miranda wrapped a protective arm around her son. No one's mad, sweetheart. It's just grown-up talk. She looked up at Jackson and Veronica. I think it's time for you both to leave. Jackson hesitated, conflict evident in his expression. Miranda, please, she said firmly. We can talk tomorrow. After a moment's hesitation, Jackson nodded. I'll call you in the morning. He turned to Veronica. We're leaving now. As the door closed behind them, Miranda could hear the argument continuing in the hallway, their voices receding as they moved toward the elevator. She leaned against the door, suddenly exhausted. Mommy? Jamie's small voice broke through her thoughts. Is Mr. Harrington mad at us? Miranda knelt down, gathering him into her arms. No, sweetheart, he's not mad at us. Grown-ups just have complicated feelings sometimes. As she tucked Jamie into bed later that night, Miranda found herself wondering if she had made a terrible mistake in allowing Jackson Harrington into their lives. What had seemed like a miraculous connection, a chance for Jamie to know his father's family, now felt fraught with complications she hadn't anticipated. The accusation in Veronica's eyes had planted a seed of doubt that took root in her mind. What if Jackson's motives weren't as straightforward as they appeared? What if this newfound uncle disappeared from Jamie's life as quickly as he had entered it? She glanced at her phone, noting the absence of messages. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations and decisions. For tonight, watching her son sleep peacefully, Miranda could only hope that the tangled web of Harrington family dynamics wouldn't end up hurting the person she loved most in the world. Block 4. Truth and Reconciliation. The coffee shop bustled with mid-morning activity, the clatter of cups creating a buffer of ambient noise that gave Miranda and Jackson a measure of privacy. 2 days had passed since Veronica's unexpected appearance, 2 days of unanswered calls and growing uncertainty. Miranda stirred her latte, watching Jackson across the table. He looked tired, the pristine image of the confident CEO somewhat diminished by the shadows under his eyes. Thank you for meeting me, he said. I wanted to apologize for what happened. Veronica had no right to speak to you that way. But her suspicions weren't entirely unfounded, Miranda replied. The timing is convenient. Robert's estate settled last month and suddenly an heir appears. Jackson's expression tightened. Veronica sees threats everywhere. In this case, her suspicions are completely misplaced. Are they? Miranda pressed. Have you accepted Jamie as Robert's son with barely any verification? Why were you so quick to believe me? The question hung between them as Jackson considered his answer. Outside, leaves skittered across the sidewalk in a sudden gust of wind. Because of the drawing, he finally said. The way Jamie wrote his name, it was exactly how Robert used to sign his name as a child. The same awkward capital letters, the same slight tilt. He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. And then there's Jamie himself. He doesn't just have Robert's eyes, he has his mannerisms, his expressions. Miranda felt her throat tighten. These were things she'd noticed in Jamie herself, characteristics she couldn't have known came from his father. Still, Jackson continued, Veronica was right about one thing. We should have a DNA test. Not because I doubt you, but because it will silence any questions about Jamie's place in the Harrington family. Miranda nodded. That's fair. I have nothing to hide. I know you don't, Jackson said, offering a slight smile. But there's something else you should know. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a folded document. This arrived yesterday from the family attorney. It seems Robert left a contingency in his will that none of us knew about. Miranda unfolded it carefully. Legal terminology filled the page, but certain phrases jumped out. In the event of posthumous discovery of legitimate offspring, trust fund, educational and medical expenses. Robert provided for any children he might have had, she said, surprised. He never even knew about Jamie. Jackson nodded. The trust is substantial, Miranda. More than enough to cover Jamie's medical treatments and his education through college. I didn't come looking for this, she said quietly. I know, Jackson replied. That's why I believe you. Someone hunting for Harrington money would have approached me directly years ago, not applied for a night cleaning position. Their shared laugh eased the tension, creating a small moment of connection. There's something else, Jackson added. Veronica and I are no longer engaged. Miranda's eyes widened. Because of us. Not because of you and Jamie, he interrupted gently. Because of her reaction to you and Jamie. It revealed something fundamental about how she sees the world. He shook his head. Our relationship has been strained for months. This situation just brought the underlying issues to the surface. I'm sorry, Miranda offered. Jackson shrugged, changing the subject. How is Jamie doing after the other night? He's resilient, Miranda said. He asked about you, though. Wanted to know when Mr. Harrington would visit again to see more of his drawings. A genuine smile transformed Jackson's face. I'd like that. After the DNA test results come back, perhaps we could tell him the truth, that I'm his uncle? Let's take it one step at a time, she cautioned. Jamie forms attachments quickly. I don't want him to get hurt if this becomes too complicated. Fair enough, Jackson agreed. And what about the job at Meridian? If the position is legitimate, and if I'd report to Alice Chen rather than directly to you, then yes, I'd like to interview properly for it. Jackson nodded. I'll have HR contact you, and to be clear, the job offer stands regardless of anything else that happens between us. Their conversation continued more easily after that, practical matters giving way to stories about Jamie, about Robert, about the family history that now connected them. 4 weeks later, Miranda stood in her new office at Meridian Enterprises, arranging a small potted plant on the windowsill. Her first 3 weeks as executive assistant to Alice Chen had been challenging but rewarding. The VP of Community Relations was demanding but fair, and she'd made it clear that Miranda had been hired on merit, not family connections. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She turned to find Jackson standing in the doorway, an envelope in his hand. The DNA results, she asked. Just arrived, he confirmed, sitting down but making no move to open the envelope. Over the past month, they had settled into a cautious routine. Weekly visits with Jamie, occasional dinners where they navigated the complexities of their situation. You haven't looked? She asked, surprised. Jackson shook his head. I wanted us to do this together. With careful precision, Jackson opened the envelope and unfolded the paper inside. A slow smile spread across his face. 99.9% probability of paternal-uncle relationship, he read aloud. Jamie is officially a Harrington. Despite having never doubted Jamie's paternity, Miranda felt relief wash over her. Which brings me to the other reason for my visit, Jackson continued. I'd like to tell Jamie this weekend that I'm his uncle, that his father was my brother. All right, she agreed, but let me prepare him first. It's a lot for a 6-year-old to process. Of course, Jackson said. I was thinking we could visit the Children's Museum on Saturday. He mentioned wanting to see the dinosaur exhibit. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken when Jackson cleared his throat. There's one more thing, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket and withdrawing a small velvet box. This belonged to Robert. Miranda opened it to reveal a simple silver pocket watch engraved with the Harrington family crest. It was a graduation gift from our father, Jackson explained. Robert always carried it. I thought Jamie might like to have it someday. A piece of his father to keep close. Tears pricked at Miranda's eyes. He would treasure this, she said quietly. Thank you. Jackson nodded, appearing relieved. I have other things too. Photos, letters, even some of Robert's childhood drawings. When Jamie's older, perhaps he'd like to see them. When Jamie's drawing fell that day in your office, I was mortified, Miranda reflected. I never imagined it would change our lives completely. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, Jackson said. How the smallest moments can alter everything. 6 months later, on a crisp spring morning, Miranda watched from a park bench as Jackson pushed Jamie on a swing, the boy's laughter carrying across the playground. The surgery to correct Jamie's heart condition had been successful, his recovery quicker than the doctors had predicted. Her phone buzzed with a message from Alice Chen. Proposal approved by the board. Program expansion confirmed. Congratulations. Miranda smiled. The community arts program had been her first major project at Meridian, combining her business acumen with her passion for creating opportunities for underserved communities. "Mom, did you see how high I went?" Jamie called, jumping from the swing and running toward her with boundless energy. "I saw, sweetheart," she assured him. "Careful with your chest, remember?" "I'm all better now," Jamie insisted, turning to Jackson, who had followed. "Uncle Jack says I'm as strong as a T-Rex." As they walked toward the ice cream stand, a tradition after their park outings, Miranda reflected on how thoroughly their lives had intertwined. Jackson had become a constant presence, not just for Jamie, but for her as well. "I received an interesting offer yesterday," Miranda said, glancing at Jackson. "The director position for the Harrington Foundation." Jackson's smile was knowing. "They might have had some inside information about your qualifications." "You recommended me?" she asked, surprised. "I merely pointed out that someone with your perspective might be ideal," he clarified. "The decision was entirely theirs. I'd have to leave Meridian," she mused. "True," Jackson acknowledged, "but you'd be helping shape the Harrington legacy, Jamie's legacy. And we'd still see each other at family dinners." The casual reference to family dinners warmed her. What had begun as an awkward arrangement had evolved into something genuine. Sunday meals at Jackson's home, holiday celebrations, impromptu weeknight visits. Later that evening, as she tucked Jamie into bed, he asked to see the silver pocket watch again, his most treasured possession. "Uncle Jack says this helped my dad keep track of adventures," Jamie said sleepily. "Do you think Dad would be happy I have it now?" Miranda brushed the hair from his forehead. "I know he would, sweetheart. And I think he'd be very proud of the boy you're becoming." "And happy that Uncle Jack found us?" Jamie asked, his eyelids growing heavy. "Very happy," she assured him. "The most important thing to your dad was family, and now we're all together." Outside Jamie's bedroom, she found Jackson waiting in the living room, reviewing foundation documents. "He's asleep?" he asked. Miranda nodded, settling beside him on the couch. Whatever the future held, new career challenges, Jamie's continued growth, the evolving nature of their own relationship, Miranda felt ready to face it with the strength of family behind her. "You know," Jackson said finally, "when I saw Jamie's name on that drawing 6 months ago, I thought I was seeing the past, a ghost of what I'd lost. But it wasn't the past at all." He turned to her, his expression open. "It was the future." Miranda smiled, understanding perfectly. Sometimes the most unexpected detours lead exactly where you're meant to go. A dropped drawing, a shocked CEO, a child's name scrawled in crayon, small moments that had changed everything, bringing 3 lost souls together into a family none of them had imagined, but all of them now treasured.